Well, what's this, you ask? It is not a cooler full of frosty refreshments. It's got something else in it. This is a bag of dry ice. And I'm going to use it to try and get these pre-cups out of the head. That one is stuck, and that one is stuck. On this one, what I did is I put a couple beads of weld, I don't know if you can see them or not, on opposite sides of it, because I got a set of pullers here, and these screw in and expand. They're blind hole pullers. And then I got a slide hammer to work on them with. I worked for about a half a day trying to pull these out. I put the slide puller on it. I made a custom puller that I could turn with a wrench like you would use to pull out cylinder liners. Nothing worked. So now I'm going to use the dry ice to try and shrink them some and then pull on them again. I'm just going to take some chunks of this and put it down in there. Try and smush them in so it fills the cup right up. There we go. So I filled that cup right up with dry ice. I'm going to let it sit in there for quite a while and freeze everything down, and hopefully that'll shrink it enough to pull it out. This issue with the pre-cups is just one of a whole bunch of little issues that have been nagging at me about the MD, and I've been in here working a little bit, although you haven't seen it. I've been doing a lot of outside work, so I've been showing that, but things have been proceeding, and I'm about ready to put the bare engine back on the tractor rear end. I'll show you where I am. Dad got the starter back together, new Bendix, new bushings, and new brushes. Ready to go. I purchased a used battery ignition unit for an MD from Bates, and I'm going to have to go through that. These are really simple. They don't have a spark advance in them, so there's one less complication. For those of you who wonder, distributors were an option on an MD in 1950, so this technically is original even though it had a magneto on it. And I made a new set of foldover plates for the connecting rods on the pistons. The old ones were shot, so I made a full set of them, and I got to put those on. Squatch, if you're watching, I did the best I can. It's certainly not factory, but they'll work. And I've done some minor things putting the engine together. I put the water jacket covers back on. For these, I use the gasket, plus I smear Permatex Right Stuff on both sides in case this deforms a little bit, this thin sheet metal, and helps ensure against leaks. This stuff is great, Right Stuff. I've never had a leak, and I've used it a whole lot. The past couple weeks as I've been doing other things around the farm, I've been thinking about the order of assembly for this engine, and anybody that knows mechanics knows there's a million different ways to skin that cat. Normally I would assemble the engine as much as I can and then paint it off the tractor and then put it on the tractor, but I'm going to do something different this time. I'm going to put the engine pretty much as it is here now back onto the rear part of the tractor, and then assemble the rest of the engine. Put the oil pump and the oil pan on, put the head on, put the rocker arms on, the valve cover, and then I can paint the engine as a unit while it's up on the tractor. I'll just mask it off where it intersects with the rear end of the tractor. The reason I want to do it that way is because I want to double check and triple check the timing on the front cover here. So I want to be able to leave the front cover off, put the head on, and check the timing of the distributor drive and the injection pump. These gears are marked and I put them in register when I put them together, but I would like to be able to check top dead center related to the workings of the valves just as a final check, and I want to make sure everything lines up when I put on the pump and the distributor drive. So that's the way I'm going to do it. There are other ways to do it, but I think that this way I'll feel most assured that everything's right. The other thing that I did is I sent the pump and the injectors off to Central Injection in Iowa. I did that early last week. It arrived there, I think, on Thursday. It was $125 just to ship it UPS. The pump and the injectors weighed about 75 pounds. It's not cheap, but hopefully I'll hear from them soon and have that injection pump back. All right, this ought to be cold enough now. The ice is almost melted that's in there, so hopefully it's good and cold. I tried using this thing 6 ways from Sunday to pull it out, and I couldn't get it out. I have my doubts about this method too, but I guess we'll find out. So all these are is as you screw down This bolt, it spreads these 3 ears and expands into the sleeve. Then the slide hammer goes on. And I got a measurement so I can tell it's moving at all. Hasn't moved a bit so far. Nope. The set also came with this puller, which doesn't work worth a crap. You can't get it seated to pull straight. So what I do is put a couple sockets underneath it so that it stays rigid. What's been happening before I tried the dry ice is eventually the puller doesn't have enough grip down inside the expandable puller and it slips, or the jaws rack on it and then it slips out. Which is what's going to happen right now, I imagine. Yep. Ah! Well, I'll pack it with more dry ice and chill it some more. Here's the issue with these things. Here's a good one that fell out. They have this groove on the sides, and you can see here where it's packed up with carbon a little bit. I think that what I'm running into is the ones that are tight are packed full of carbon from blow-by from the piston. I thought about, and people have suggested, welding inside here. I can do that. I think I can reach down in there with a wire feed gun, but the bottom of it is so thick, I just don't know how much I'm going to shrink it, and I guess that's what I'm going to try if the dry ice doesn't work. There's no way to attach a puller directly to the cup because this hole in the bottom is eccentric to the pulling direction. It's at a slant like this. So I can't thread it and put a puller on it. I'm not comfortable drilling a hole in the bottom of it and threading and tapping that to put a puller on it, because if I go over it all, I'm into the head and damaging the head. So I'm not going to do that. And the last option, if all else fails, welding, dry ice, is to take it to my dad's friend's shop, he's a retired machinist. You met him in an earlier video. And set it up on his milling machine and mill the old pre-cups out. All right, we'll try her again. Not moving. Nope. This is the problem with cheap tools. This thing's actually deformed from pulling on it. I think this was called the Happy Fun Puller Set. Well, we'll try round number 3. I'm going to leave that ice in that cup for a good long time this time and replenish it as it melts, and just trying to be patient with it. In the meantime, I can take these rod bolts out and put the foldover locks on them. So these locks sit down in this recess like that. Bolt goes in. These get torqued to 115 foot-pounds. The other one's kind of a bugger to bend over. Huh. Bend this over one with a set of channel locks. Just can't get in there to drive on it. I'll try her again. At this point, I've about given up hope. Nope. Phooey. At least that's it for the fold-over locks. I got those all in. All right, I've got a Hail Mary idea for these, getting these pre-cups out. And what I did is I welded a couple washers together for thickness and then welded a nut onto the end. I'm going to slide it down in the bore, weld it onto the pre-cup, and then use a bolt and a plate to cross to pull it out. We'll see if it works. So I ground down this washer so it fits inside of the upper part of the pre-cup. So I got a lip in here to weld against. Here's what I did. She ain't pretty, but hopefully it'll get the job done. Now we'll try this. Ha! It moved! I'll shorten up my bolt by putting some more washers on my puller so it doesn't bottom out as it comes up. Aha! Yep. Wowie! Boy, I'm sure glad that's out. But what a job. Here's my nasty welding job. It's not easy to weld way down in there, but it was good enough, I guess. And you can see how this is all caked up with carbon in here. I suspect that's what jammed it in the bore. And here's what it looks like inside the bore. There's a whole bunch of carbon crusted down in the bottom of there and on the walls. And I'm going to have to clean that out real good with carburetor cleaner, and I might even have to hone the bores to get them nice and clean. I didn't want to put you guys through the process again, but I also got the other one out, and that one actually came out easier than the first one. You may be wondering why I went through all the work to take those pre-cups out and why I didn't just leave them in there. Well, one of them fell out with the injectors. The other I had to drive on a little bit. And once you start driving on them and mark them up, they really got to come out. I mean, you can see how badly I drove on this one. If I'd known that they wouldn't come out, I would have left them in, but once I started, I committed. Now, the real reason, I guess, to take them out is at the bottom of each one of them, there's a copper sealing washer, a crush washer, and there's also a crush washer at the top of each one where the injector comes into it. And these provide a combustion seal to keep gases from the cylinder from coming up past the injector from blowing by it. And really, these should be replaced. It's obvious there was a lot of blow-by happening already from all the carbon that had accumulated in these. Now, they aren't making these right now, and the places I've looked so far don't have them, and it's the old story of, well, they're being made, we don't know when we'll have them. Since they're made out of copper, I'm thinking I'm going to re-anneal them, heat them up so they soften again, and then reuse them, because they're all nice and straight. They just need to be pliable enough to make a new seal when I seat the injectors back in the engine. So I think that's what I'm going to do. The other thing is at the top of each injector there's an O-ring, and I believe that's more of a dust shield to keep dust from coming in from around the injector bore while the engine's running from the outside. So I've got 3 of those. I got to find another one of those, but hopefully that won't be a big deal. They look like regular O-rings, and these are nice and pliable so I can reuse them. So that ordeal is over. Next thing, I'll put in the rear main seal that goes around the crankshaft, and it's a 3-piece deal on pretty much every international I've worked on, I think. Crankshaft goes through the hole here, and on the top one I had to do a little sanding because the bolts had pulled the pop metal or aluminum or whatever it is down, and so I wouldn't have a proper gasket seating surface, so I sanded them down quite a bit. This one's fine. You know, if you put the two together, you can see there's quite a gap out at the ends of these. So what I'm going to do is, when I have to fill a little space, I use this stuff, the Right Stuff, Permatex Right Stuff. Like I said, I've always had good luck with it. I use high tack at a normal tightly seated gasket. I'll use some of this if I run into problems like at the outside of these ears. So I have been soaking the felts that make the seal in these grooves, and we'll go ahead and put them in. Just push her in, push her down. I'm going to coat the engine side of the gasket, the side that goes on the engine block, with just regular high-tack gasket sealant. And then this makes it kind of a pain once on the engine stand. Usually I do these after I take it off the engine stand and hang it from a chain, but I figured I'd do it this way this time. Just use these bolts to hang it in place. Now, although I sanded this on a flat surface, I've still got some hollow spots or some low spots. So on this side of the gasket, I'm going to use Right Stuff, and that'll fill the voids better. Here's the tricky part. I got to work this upper retainer in between the engine stand and the engine without smearing gasket sealer all over the place. I know it fits in because I tried it, and I knew it fits in some way or another. I'm trying to remember how now. How did I do it? There we go. Now I can put the lower half on. I'm just going to use the regular gasket sealer on that. But we've also got these two gaskets between the upper and the lower retainer. And remember, we've got the slope in there, so I'm going to use the Right Stuff again to seal that. This is very sticky stuff. Typically, this kind of gasket sealer is used in places where you have no gasket to sort of act as the gasket, but sometimes I use it like this. If I have a gap like that, I certainly don't want this seal to leak. I'm not tightening these bolts at all, not until I put in the two bolts that draw the two halves together, and they go in from the bottom down there, because I want them to be able to move to cinch together. Then these two long bolts go in from the bottom here to hold the two halves together. And hopefully I got the gaskets lined up still. And now that I've got the two halves drawn together, I can go ahead and tighten up all the bolts on the face of the retainers. Well, I had to step away quick. The injection pump rebuilder called, and my pump and injectors are all ready to go. They're sending them back. The total was, I think it was like $1,700, including return shipping. They said that nothing was wrong out of the ordinary with the pump. It was just a regular rebuild, wear items, and the injectors were okay. They cleaned them up, tested them, and they were fine. So we should see those back in 3 days or so. There, that's set. The last part of this rear main seal is the bottom piece that mates with the oil pan, and these never got pulled out. These are the seals through the sides, little rubber tubes. So we got to pull those and put new ones in. These rear mains aren't quite as goofy as the C113 series rear mains that come on everything from the A through the Super C through the 504. They're a call. Those are more difficult to get together leak proof, especially in this area right here. This one isn't too bad. My gasket's a little long here, so I'm going to trim that off. I've got new rubber dowels that go in here. We'll put those in first. I'm going to put a little bit of gasket sealer on them. Push them in there. Hate to dump this in the engine. Don't put that so close to the engine. There. I coated this gasket on the bottom side, set that in there. I want to coat these corners just to make sure I don't get seepage through them. There. And I'm just going to put a couple temporary bolts in here to seal up the gasket while it sets. They'll come off when the oil pan goes on. Alrighty, let's see how she turns. Putting in that seal tightened it up quite a bit, which is a good thing, I guess. Well, that does it for me today. Everything seems to fight me on this engine, but it's slowly making progress. The last thing I want to mention is I got the old pistons cleaned up. It took about, I don't know, an hour and a half in the ultrasonic and a lot of wire brushing, but I'm sending those out to the folks who were the first 4 to donate $200 or more to the GoFundMe way back in December, and I'm sorry it's so late. Things have gotten held up, but they should be in the mail this week. I hope you enjoyed this video. We're supposed to get some more rain this week, so I might be working on the MD for Friday's video. I'm not real sure yet. Anyway, I'll have a video on Friday. I'll see you then.